Frank with Industry Diesel, and we're going to guide you through our warranty procedure and evaluation process, and Chris is going to guide you through it.
So here we have a turbo that came in for a warranty. So we're going to start off basically by checking on the exhaust side to make sure that the shaft is still intact or anything has gone through here or through here. We'll check the oil inlet because majority of people like to use silicone, and silicone's bad because it can clog up all the inlets or anything like that and prevent oil from lubricating the whole system. We'll also want to check to see if the VGT is moving or free at all, and we'll also want to check the compressor side, make sure anything's going in here or if there's oil leaking from here. So we have this one that we already took apart. As you can see, material went in through the exhaust side and hit the vanes and the turbine shaft, right? So this would cause, lack of boost or throw a code on the VGT or anything like that. Here we have some examples, other examples of problems that go wrong with the turbos. Frank, you want to guide us through it?
What most technicians, when we supply a turbo, we usually outline a procedure, usually with Cummins, but we recommend verifying the EGR system, at least cleaning it out, and verifying that the EGR cooler is not leaking, as well as the diesel particulate filter needs to be cleaned out. Failing to do so, you can get coolant that builds up in the EGR system. The reason for the debris that comes through the exhaust is the actual coolant that allows that carbon to stick to the walls of the piping, and when it dries, it turns to almost stone. It's hardened carbon, and that will cause it to blow out the exhaust and damage the VGT and damage the turbine wheel. That will cause turbo issues. As well as items like plugged DPF. A DPF filter, if it becomes plugged with things like either carbon or soot from the injection system, as well as coolant from the EGR, a leaking EGR cooler, will cause thrust issues. So the exhaust system is trying to flow out the exhaust, or it's trying to get out through the DPF, and it's being backed up. And that excessive pressure, that back pressure, will force that turbine wheel back up towards the front, towards the compressor side, forcing the wheel onto this thrust bearing. And that will cause leaking. It could cause shafts to blow, overheat, and things like that. So this is important information for mechanics to utilize when replacing turbos, because just replacing a turbo won't fix the peripheral issues unless you physically remove the EGR system, DPF, and clean them out and reinstall them. Other issues that we have as well when we notice turbo failures, contaminants in the oil. And this middle bearing here, this bearing here, shows you coolant damage. So coolant in the oil will discolor bearings because they should be a bright yellow, brass color. As well as contamination in the oil will cause scoring on these bearings. And the problem that the scoring causes is it begins to wear away at the metal, not only on the outside, but also on the inside of the bearing. The shaft rides on the inside, the bearing rides in the bearing housing externally on oil, and if that debris inside the oil causes it to wear away excessively, it throws out the tolerance, and that will cause excessive shaft play and oil leakage, resulting, if it's not caught early enough, it will result in a catastrophic turbo failure. Chris also mentioned one of the things that we do look for is debris being sucked in through the compressor cover, through the air inlet side. That's typically shown as the leading edge of the compressor wheel being damaged or bitten by debris, and this can be caused by one of two things typically. Dirty air filter. So if poor maintenance is an issue, debris can be sucked in from the air filter, and that will cause this type of damage. Or if the previous turbo that was installed had a catastrophic failure, and when it explodes, if that wheel touches the side of that turbo, it can grenade, and that debris from the aluminum wheel can actually go upstream and lodge itself into the air piping. And if the mechanic who's installing that new turbo does not clean out that air intake properly, when they replace that turbo and they put that piping back on, even if they've replaced the air filter, all that debris that's lodged itself in the rubber boots or the piping, if it's not cleaned out, will be ingested back into that new turbo, causing a failure.
This is an example of what the compressor cover would look like after catastrophic failure on the compressor side. So as you can see, there's a lot of pitting done in here, and that's definitely bad for this turbo, right? So as Frank said earlier, that there was scoring on some of these bearings here. Here we have a shaft with major scoring on the shaft itself. And as Frank said earlier, that could cause a catastrophic failure in the turbo as well.
We also have a turbine shaft that has been hit by debris coming out the exhaust. This can be caused typically in an EGR system, hardened carbon, either by bad injection or from a leaking EGR cooler that's caused carbon to build up and solidify. But when it comes out and it shoots through the exhaust, typically is deflected through it sits basically inside, it's deflected from the VGT to the turbine wheel, causing this type of damage. In the process, it will damage the VGT, both the VGT and the turbine wheel at the same time. If the carbon is big enough, or the debris is big enough, it could actually blow the shaft clean off, or it could completely damage the VGT, causing it to become inoperable. And this is when you start to see complaints of low boost, low power. Typically there could be dash lights, engine light come on with an engine code for an actuator issue or VGT mechanical fault. Replacing a turbo on these new systems, simply replacing the turbo is not going to be adequate in order to keep the customer on the road and operating his truck perfectly. So again, when customers are changing turbos, EGR system needs to be removed. All the EGR piping has to be cleaned, washed. EGR cooler must be removed, washed out, pressure tested, if not replaced. And most of all, importantly, the DPF also needs to be removed from the truck and sent out for cleaning. And at that point, whoever is cleaning it for you will tell you if it's flowing correctly or if it needs to be replaced. On behalf of Industry Diesel and myself, I'd like to thank you for watching. And don't forget, whenever you have a turbo, fuel pump, or fuel injection requirement, call us here at Industry Diesel.
Thank you very much.